Today we're going to talk a little bit about macro photography, and in particular what we're going to do is discuss using the box that I made to act as a stable platform for your camera. Now you can use a regular tripod and there's no problem with that, but in macro photography one of the biggest things is stability. The more stable platform you have for your camera, the more clear you are going to get the image. And remember, these are very, very, very small focus points. You don't have infinity, you don't have a foot. You're talking about less than maybe a tenth of an inch at times is all your focus is. So any small motion that you're going to have is going to cause problems in the box. So that's one of the reasons why I designed that particular box, is for stability. I do have a good platform. My tripod is a Getzel, but even that doesn't necessarily work very well when I have a very heavy camera with a long extension tubes on it in order to take macro photography. The second thing that you need to do macro photography is a macro lens. If you don't have a macro lens, well, you probably shouldn't be looking at this video yet. I would go ahead and just close it up. But I have a 100mm macro lens, and I use this for quite a bit of my photography. The other thing is noted is that there are two variances of a macro lens. You have the generic ones that are pretty pricey, but they're fairly decent. Or you can have their L variant, I don't know what Nikon's variant is, that are much better lenses. But to be honest with you, when you're doing macro photography, you're doing a very, very small increments, and the lens is important, but not as much as the rest of the issue. Then you have your last component of macro photography, and that is extension tubes. You use the extension tubes to gain magnification and closeness to your object. But by using the extension tubes, you are now narrowing that band of focus even further. So it's very important to understand that focus, stability, that's your key to successful macro photography. Now, this particular set of extension tubes is made by Kenko, and the reason I like it is it's metal. There's no plastic on here. And it also moves the electronics signals from the lens into the camera. Cheaper things will work, but they'll cause other issues. Now, since I use a program to do all of my macro photography step work, without the contacts in the lens, I would not be able to control the diaphragm of the lens, and it would be fairly worthless. Now, this particular set of extension tubes can be further separated into different categories based on what I'm particularly shooting. I generally don't use all three at the same time. You can if you're shooting something extremely small, like maybe a bug, you want to just get the antenna, or maybe the pistils within the flower itself and not the scope of the flower. I would use all three of these things. In general, I use maybe one, maybe two at utmost, and that's about it. So that's the basics of the supply side that you need. A good mount that's stable. I use my wood box I made, and we have a few examples of those that people have. You need a macro lens, and optionally you also need the computer program to put everything together. So those three are the primary things you require before you do macro photography. Now, some people go ahead and tell me, well, you know what, you can probably do macro photography with Photoshop and something else like that. And you probably can, but I'll tell you one thing, it's a real pain. So I rather use dedicated programs for macro photography. They're cheap, they're not all that bad. You can put them up on a trial. I'll list the ones that I use at the very end of this video. Okay, so let's go over to the next step and see what we can do with our box that we made. So let's talk a little bit about the box. So the box has a couple of interesting points to it. One, it should have two knobs on one side of it, and you'll see several different holes. Well, the holes are designed so how close you are to the object that you can be taking pictures of. So you can mount it all the way at the top if you have a really long macro lens, or you can mount it closer to one of these points if your lenses are a little bit short. Now, I supplied a screw that is a 1/4-20 screw, and this screw you push in through the bottom, and that you can tighten your camera right to the screw. So that's a very simple project. The other option that you have is to move your system up and down depending upon what the angle is that you want to take your photo at. So let's do something very simple here. I'm going to put one extension on my camera with my macro lens. So we'll do that. And I'll mount the macro lens into here. The next thing I'll do is I'll screw on the lens and make sure it's nice and tight. And you want to line it up so that it's even. And the last thing you want to do is you want to connect up your USB cable to your camera if you are doing it via the USB remote control. Sometimes it's easier to put on the go. Okay, so we got that now connected up to the computer. Now the program I'm using is called Helix in Focus, and I love it. It really is a good thing. And we're going to discuss that in depth a little bit later. So what am I going to shoot? So for my macro, I'm going to be shooting this little object over here, which is off of a magnolia tree. And I'm going to put it into the general area. So you can see this. I'll move this slowly. And you can see where it is, okay? Now, in line, I'm going to realign this thing so that the interesting part is there. And then I'm going to move my camera into some position that I think is going to make an interesting object. And you move it around a few times. You move it around until you see what you want. Okay, that looks about interesting for me. Okay. Then I rotate the focus point, so I want to see the focus point move. Now you can play around with the lighting all you want to, but that's really it. You got stability, you got it tightened down, make sure that both sides are down. You don't need a lot of thickness on the walls here. All you need is it to form a box structure, which you just did. So my angle, everything is set up. So the only thing left to do is to go on Helix in Focus and start taking my macros. Very simple.